So here's something that was announced months ago, and I didn't even realize this was coming out until now. I didn't even realize this was coming out until apparently it's coming out. I think first week of July or the second, sometime in July, basically, to coincide with the release of the new Tarzan film. And that, as you can see from the title, is King Kong versus Tarzan. Let me say that again: King Kong versus Tarzan. Now, yes, there actually has been a crossover called Kong Meets Tarzan, and you can actually find the novel on Amazon. It's literally the weirdest but most awesome thing I've ever heard. In that novel, Kong survives his death at his quote-unquote death at the hands of the planes at the end of the film. And what happens is that Kong's returned to Africa, and he meets Tarzan, and they fight Nazis. Yeah, Kong and Tarzan fight Nazis in Africa. It's amazing. But yeah, so this crossover is brought to us by a group called Atlas Press, which I am not familiar with any of their work. I don't know if it's a comic book company or a novel company. I think it's supposed to be a novel company. Yeah, it's supposed to be I think it's supposed to be a group for. So it's probably going to be a novel. But yeah, Atlas Press is bringing us this idea, and I could not be more excited. Kong meets Tarzan? Yeah, of course I'm going to read it. I love Kong, I love Tarzan, so of course I'm going to fucking read it. And the premise behind this crossover is actually pretty interesting between Kong and Tarzan. The crossover idea is that this is supposed to take place during the events of the film, like it's an inner prequel. So it's actually supposed to take place right after the events of when Driscoll and oh god, what's his name? Driscoll, Jack Driscoll and oh god, I'm forgetting his name. Carl Denham, yeah. After Denham and Driscoll and the others capture Kong in the original film, yeah, this is the original film continuity. So yeah, Driscoll and the rest of the group, yeah, Carl Denham and the rest of the group capture Kong, and yeah, this actually takes place during the voyage back to New York. So this is set during the events of the film. And during that time, apparently what happens is that they take a stop at Africa, and Kong escapes into the forest, and this alerts the presence of Tarzan. So, yeah, Kong is now loose in the jungles of Africa, and Tarzan is asked by the others to, hey, could you bring him back? You're a gorilla guy, so go get him. So, hence, we have Kong versus Tarzan. Now, you may be thinking, well, that's kind of an unfair fight. I mean, Kong's a 25-foot-tall gorilla, and Tarzan's just a man. You're talking about a dude who's killed dinosaurs, really. You're talking about a guy who's killed a T-Rex. You're talking about a guy who's killed a amount of things. And plus, I'm pretty sure they're not actually going to fight. I'm pretty sure, well, they may fight now that I think about it, but yeah. It's still a really cool idea of having Kong loose in Africa. I think that's really cool, because now he's kind of in a world where there are other apes, but they're not as big as him, and now he won't feel... I'm really hoping that he really has some interactions with the apes. I'm really hoping that he can have some cool interactions with Tarzan's family group that he lives with. Maybe even capture Jane. What's probably going to happen, here's what's going to happen, is that Kong is probably going to try to capture Anne, but instead he ends up grabbing Jane instead, and that what prompts prompts Tarzan to go after Kong, mostly to rescue his dear beloved Jane. So that's what I'm thinking. Now like I said, sounds really cool, because this is actually taking place in the film, and they're explaining, this is what leads to, Kong being in chains, as well as what leads to in the film of Kong's downfall when he arrives in New York. So I'm really curious of how they're going to play all these elements. But I would imagine Tarzan would be pretty old by this time. It's the 1920s, well, 1930s, yeah, 1930s, and at this point, Tarzan was a character that was around in the 1920s, so I'd imagine he's a little older. Tarzan's a little older, but then again, they could easily say, no, Tarzan's just been around for, Tarzan is just recently new, and we're not going to really go into his age. So, there you go. But yeah, I think this is a really cool idea. I think that I'm really hoping that Kong goes to Pellucidar. I am absolutely hoping that Kong somehow ends up in Pellucidar and fights his way through fights a T-Rex down there. I hope he fights several dinosaurs in there, and even encounters the Mahars. If you don't know who the Mahars are a race of humanoid pterodactyls that psychically control other humans to do their bidding. They're pretty much what Sauron from the X-Men are, Sauron from the X-Men, that pterodactyl villain from X-Men comics, like I said, he's actually based off of the Mahars in Tarzan. That's what he's loosely based off of. A race of pterodactyl people who control people's minds to do their bidding. Yeah, that sounds really familiar. Also, the Mahars showed up in the Tarzan vs. Predator crossover, and I can't believe I forgot about their name. It was just, in the back of my mind. But yeah, maybe Kong smashes Mahars. I don't know. That sounded really wrong. Anyway. But yeah, I really do think this is a cool idea, and I think it's equally cooler that they're putting this during the events of the very first film. Initially, this was supposed to be a prequel idea, following the dream of the original director of King Kong, who directed both Kong and Son of Kong, and this was the film he wanted to do, was have a prequel to King Kong and have him encounter Tarzan, and this would lead to Kong finding his way to, Skull Island. That was the original idea, but sadly that never came to pass. And the people at Atlas Plus initially wanted to do that until they came along with the idea of, hey, here's an interesting idea. How about we put it during the events of the original 1930s King Kong, but have it that it's set in between the sections of the film. It's an inner prequel. Yeah. And I think that's a very smart idea, because I would imagine that, going from, wherever Skull Island is back to New York, it would be a long-ass trip back and forth, and they would obviously, back then you'd have to, break for supplies and fuel and food for your crew, and not to mention a lot of food for the giant gorilla you now have locked up in your hull. So, yeah, it would stand to reason that they would have to take a break somewhere, and I would imagine at this point in time there are several ports in Africa that are not too far away. So it would stand to reason that they would probably break to at least get food for Kong, because I would imagine it's a long ass trip, and you have to keep this ape alive. You have to keep this 25-foot tall gorilla alive to at least keep him fed long enough to at least reach Manhattan. So it would stand to reason that they would have to break somewhere to, at least get food. Yeah. So I'm really excited for this. This thing was apparently announced in March, and I had no idea until I came across a little article saying, "Oh yeah, coming soon, King Kong versus Tarzan. Be prepared." I was like, "What the fuck? Who didn't tell me about this? Come on. Why was I not alerted sooner?" Yeah. So I'm really interested in this. I want to pick this up. I'm really excited for this. But you guys tell me, what do you guys think of King Kong versus Tarzan? Do you guys like it? Do you guys hate it? Do you want to see Kong in Pellucidar? How do you think the fight between Kong and Tarzan will go down? Really curious to see what you guys have to say about this on a whole. And once again, hope you all enjoyed this, and I will see you guys later.